Roll the titles.
I live at the end of a 5.5-minute hallway.
This fucking book. Okay. Where do I even begin at this point? Because I honestly don't know. Because this book, it broke my mind into a million pieces. More than once. I would say at least a dozen or a triple dozen times. I lost count by the 7 billionth point. Although, what do numbers even mean anymore? What does space and time and the world even mean at this point? Because this book just destroyed any and all preconceived notions that I had about anything in the world ever. Which is no big deal. No, not at all. I don't even know. Because I can't even, I'm simply unable to even. Okay, so, right. Need to begin somewhere, because it's a book review, not a depiction of a mental breakdown, which is what the book is, but shouldn't be this, because it wouldn't be pleasant viewing. So I need to review it to try and explain why it is the book has done what it has done to me and my psyche. Hey, that rhymes. Yes, so, anyway, where do we begin? Okay, let's start with the basics. House of Leaves is a book from the year 2000 by the author Mark Z. Danielewski, or Danielewski, or however you pronounce it, because I've heard various different variations. And how do you even explain the plot? I mean, it sounds simple at first, but you start reading it, you see, it's like a TARDIS. It's not as simple as the outside would make you believe. And the TARDIS thing's actually fitting in more ways than one, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that indeed. Before we proceed, I hope you don't mind if I do this, but I don't want my brain to explode while I'm trying to explain this to you, so I'm going to have this to cool it down like my brain is a computer and it needs like a fan to make sure that it doesn't overheat. So that's what we're going to do to make sure that I don't implode on you. You know, that'd be great for the views, maybe? Who knows at this point in this crazy world of ours. But yes, anyway, so the plot of the book, if it's possible to describe it to you, is... Yeah, we're going to need diagrams for this. So we're introduced to Johnny Truant over here. He's a guy who works at a tattoo parlor in LA, and he's a basic straight white male protagonist of like the Bret Easton Ellis variety. Very sleeps around and very just all about the substance abuse and that kind of thing. He's potentially very boring as a character, but this is no ordinary book, as you will see. So first we have him. Johnny discovers a trunk filled with letters belonging to an old guy named Zampano who recently died. Zampano, it should be known, was blind, yet the contents of the trunk were filled with stuff that he wrote. And it gets explained how that is, but that's neither here nor there at this point. Now, what is this trunk of letters? Well, the trunk of letters from Zampano contains the makings of a documentary book entitled The Navidson Record, or Navidson. It depends on how you decide to pronounce it, because there's characters that call the main character of Navidson, they call him Navy, so maybe it's Navidson, so it depends. It's how you decide to read it, I guess. So, Johnny takes Zampano's work of the Navidson Record, takes it away for his own, because Zampano has died, takes the Navidson Record here, and starts to work on it himself. Now, the Navidson or Navidson Record is the story of a man named Navidson who moves his family to a little secluded house in the country, and they move in, and then things start to get very weird. and the documentary is supposedly about the worldwide reaction to a film that was made out of the events that occurred in this house with Naverton, because it's kind of like a found footage movie before found footage really took off, because the book came out in 2000, which was just a year after the Blair Witch, and Danielewski had been working on the book for about 10 years or more. So he predated the whole found footage boom by quite a bit, but it is generally that's what the Naverton record is documenting. And what is it that occurred in the Naverton household, in the Naverton record, that was such a found footage horror conceit? Basically, it was that the inside of the house became bigger than the outside of the house made it seem like it should have been. And that's where the TARDIS comparison earlier comes into play as being very appropriate. To say more than that would be spoilerific, but it's scarier. It's scarier than it sounds, trust me. And so, the whole book of House of Leaves is comprised of primarily the Naverton record, which is written by Zampano, who has died, and is being compiled and edited by Johnny, but as well as this documentary being commented on by Zampano, and Johnny commenting on what Zampano has written via a whole shit ton of footnotes, endless copious amounts of footnotes after footnotes after footnotes. We also have commenting above these three comments an unnamed editor who is editing the stuff that Johnny was editing of Zampano's, who was editing altogether the documentary evidence of the Naverton record. So you have a story being told by someone else, being told by someone else, being told by someone else, who's publishing the entire story within a story within a story, and that's only the beginning of the mind-bending mechanics of this book. Now, the way that Danielewski differentiates all of this fucking mess here is that all of them are told in different fonts. Arno's documentary retelling of the Naverton record is told in one particular font, then Johnny's commenting upon Zampano's commenting of this is told in a different font via other footnotes, and then you have the editor talking in a completely different other font as well, commenting upon the commenting upon the commenting, etc, etc. So you're able to differentiate it through that, if that helps. You also have the differentiation in the way that each of them tells their story. Like Zampano is trying to be an intellectual, trying to comment upon the Naverton record and trying to essay it and be smart and just coming off as very pretentious. So Zampano's entries are the dry, academic, try too hard segments, trying to deconstruct every single little thing about the story of the Naverton record. But meanwhile, Johnny's style, as he's commenting upon Zampano's thing, we're following Johnny in a linear progression through his own life as he's starting to compile all the stuff that Zampano has written into some coherent form. And we're following Johnny as he's trying to make sense of all this, and also while he's starting to lose his mind. And we get that through him talking in a very flowery, poetic, overwritery type of way, via many detours into lots of drug taking and lots of surprisingly explicit sex scenes, which is just something else to add to the whole pile of stuff that's in this book. And then on top of the academia, on top of the mental breakdown, they then have the editor on top trying to make sense, or out of the sense, being made out of the sense of all this stuff, trying to cohere it all and trying to make it easier for the reader to see that one person's having a mental breakdown while the other person was making this whole documentary out of something that may or may not have actually ever happened in real life at all. And that's where the book starts to get even more tricksy with you, because Danielewski decides to make this whole thing filled with loads and loads of footnotes and references to books and people and quotes that may or may not even be real. And even though as you're reading you know that the entire thing is obviously fictional, the way that it's presented makes it seem so factual, and that kind of starts fucking with your head even more than it already was. And then you start blowing the line between which things are real and which things aren't, and then on top of all of that you start getting Danielewski changing the way that the words go on the page. Sometimes they're linear and left to right, then sometimes they go into columns, and sometimes they go around and then mirror backwards, and then the number of words goes smaller as things start to happen on the page, and the words decrease and they go in different places and it goes everywhere. And then on top of all that, you then have the occasional bits of code breaking, such as Morse code, or having to pick the first letters out of every word to make a message out of it, which at some point you do have to get a pen and paper and decode something that's written by someone else. And then on top of that, there's the occasional bit of flowery prose that either is flowery prose or is actually a hidden code, because sometimes even there's a hidden message. Sometimes it's Danielewski's own name. Sometimes it's just something of him, a character asking someone else a question, but you don't even know because you're just reading the whole thing, but there is a hidden clue. And even though it seems like it could just be made up, it is also part of the plan of the whole thing, because it refers to something that you might not have even noticed before, but was there and was planned. And then the book gets all meta and it breaks all manner of fourth walls, and there's no semblance of cohesion. The fourth wall completely disappears, which is fitting because of the way that the Navidson house is. And then by that point, your brain just explodes. So, you know, no big deal, no biggie. And seriously, I'm not joking when I say that this book fucked with my mind incredibly, like no other book ever has before. Because let me tell you, this book, if it does anything to your mind in a similar way as it did to mine, if you know what I mean. I'm not even sure any of this makes sense anymore, because that's what the book does to you. There came a point where the book has so deconstructed everything about reality and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and the confines of architecture and space and echoes and certainty and reality and everything, without you even noticing until it's already way too late for you to notice that he's deconstructed everything. There came a point one night when I was staying up to read the book where I put it down, closed it because I needed to get some sleep, but I found that I was unable to, because being in darkness, turning off the light, made me feel like I was floating in nothingness. That certainty of reality around me was starting to slip away, and straight lines were becoming wobbly, and I couldn't listen to ambient music to try and soothe my brain so I could go to sleep, because the ambient music, being as it is amorphous and formless and without any kind of structure to it, only made me more uneasy. Add to that the fact that in the dark I can imagine that a certain horrific creature in the book might start to appear out of nowhere, out of the darkness, to come for me, and I start getting very paranoid and jittery and nervy. So, in order to try and calm my nerves and try and anchor myself to some form of certainty in this world, I had to listen to Neutral Milk Hotels in the Aeroplane Over the Sea, because I've listened to that album so many times that I know every lyric and word and note of every song. So it's a form of certainty for me to anchor onto, even though I'm trying to sleep. At least it's something for me to feel like I'm still clinging on to something firm and tangible in this world. And it worked, and I was finally able to get to sleep, and that was quite a while ago, and nothing like that has happened since. But that is what House of Leaves did to me. It fucked my head so much. So, you know, I thoroughly recommend it. You know, 2 thumbs up, 5 stars, all that jazz. I do seriously, outside of all the crazy exaggerating acting of me acting like I'm losing my mind, outside of that, I do recommend it as a book for you all to read, because I do think that it does offer something for everyone, in spite of how difficult and obfuscating and mindfuckery it is to read as a whole. It's definitely the most difficult book I've ever read in my life, or rather the most difficult book I've ever successfully completed, because, you know, like Ulysses is still a book that I haven't been able to read at all, because just no. But I do recommend it if you're in the mood for either a horror story, or a love story, or a haunted house story, or a satire on criticism, or just something that is postmodern and completely transforms your entire view of reality for a little while. Sorry, I drifted off there for a second. Yeah, I'm still not quite over the book, even though I finished it quite a while ago. But the effects of it are lingering, shall we say. Also worth noting is that you should listen to the album Haunted by Poe. Focus, there we go. Poe is Danielewski's sister, and she did the album Haunted in accordance with the release of this book way back when. And they exchanged notes, and she wrote songs that were based on stuff he was writing in the book. So listen to that during or after you've read the book, and it'll deepen your appreciation of it. And if you're anything like me, or if your reading experience of it was anything like mine, it will be quite an obsession. Like, the book really does toy and fuck with you. It's like it's written by the most intellectual troll in the world. Because he really is, Danielewski, he really does like to mess around with you and tell you that he's messing around with you as he's messing around with you. Like, at one point, it's depicting the mechanics of labyrinths while the book itself is structuring itself as a labyrinth. And you're still going along with it, even as you know that you're being led by the hand by Danielewski into exactly where he wants you to be. It's like, it's a love-hate thing, but ultimately you do love the book, even though you know you've played exactly into Danielewski's devious grasp. And yeah, that's that. So it's a good book, and if you can find it, especially if you can find it in a full colour edition with all the illustrations and the word house always printed in blue ink and all that kind of stuff. If you can find an edition like that, it really does help the reading experience. Although I think the black and white version will do as well. Go and find the book where you can. It is definitely worth it, because you'll never read another book like it in your life. You just really won't. There's nothing else like it out there. And it's really an experience to try for yourself to see if you're receptive to it and if it does anything for you. It might not. Lots of people find it very pretentious and boring and too full of itself. And sometimes it even is that. Even though I love the book, it is sometimes actually like what the haters of it say. But still, I can't deny the effect that the book had on me as I was reading it, and the lingering thoughts that I have about it in all the days since I finished reading it. Because, I mean, honestly, I haven't been this obsessed with a piece of media that involves a story of obsession since the days of me being obsessed with the number 23, if anyone remembers that. Of course, the ironic thing here is that, guess how many chapters there are in House of Leaves? Oh, coincidence you say? Nothing to worry about. Well, here's another thing. On the day of this being uploaded, do you know what today is? Today is my 23rd birthday.
Hey pretty, don't you wanna take a ride with me through my world?
Well, I think that's enough overacting for one day.